If I'd known what that necklace hid, would I have had the courage to give it to my granddaughter? Sometimes we give away a keepsake thinking we're passing on love, when in reality we're handing over a piece of an old lie. A lie we ourselves accepted, swallowed, and called life goes on. But the truth? Oh, the truth has a curious way of coming back. Even if it takes decades, even if there are already people underground, it comes back. And when it does, it doesn't ask permission. Have you ever had that feeling of looking at a small thing, an object, a photo, a forgotten letter, and feeling that within it lies a secret no one dared tell? Stay with me until the end. What you'll discover now may surprise you. I remember the day as if it were yesterday. My granddaughter appeared to me radiant, twirling around the room with that necklace around her neck, saying she felt powerful. She said she thought it held my soul, my strength. I smiled, but inside something hurt. Because that necklace didn't have my strength. It had my weakness. It was beautiful, yes, thin, elegant. It shone in a way that drew attention without seeming over the top. But all that was just a facade. That's how my life was for a long time. Do you believe in omens? Because today, looking back, I see that the gift my husband gave me back then wasn't an act of affection. It was a silent plea for forgiveness. Only I didn't know it. Or maybe I did, but didn't want to see it. He arrived with the little red box and a smile on his face, telling me I deserved something special. I, foolishly, embraced that lie as if it were gold. I wore the necklace on birthdays, at dinners with friends, even at Christmas with family. I made it a symbol of love, when in reality it was a symbol of something else, of a betrayal that had been hidden for so many years that I almost forgot to doubt. And it was only when my granddaughter inherited that necklace, because I insisted on giving it to her myself, that the story began to unfold. It's funny how some truths lie dormant for decades until someone new, innocent, touches them, and they awaken. She wore that necklace with such pride. She said she felt connected to me, to my story. Little did she know that part of my story was still hidden in a heavy silence. But then came an unexpected visit, a conversation over coffee, and what was a quiet past became a wide-open present. I know it might seem like an exaggeration to many. Oh, it's just a necklace. But anyone who's experienced a broken love knows it's not about the object. It's about what it carries, about what was said and what was hidden, about the pain we bottle up and pretend to forget, just to move on with a smile on our face. How many times have you had to swallow a bitter truth just to keep the peace? How many times have you chosen silence for fear of losing what little was left? Because that's what I did. I chose silence, and for a long time I thought that was maturity, that it was wisdom, that silence was preservation. But deep down, it was fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of admitting that I knew deep down that that necklace wasn't just for me. And you know what struck me most? It was the way the truth came. No shouting, no fighting, no soap opera drama. Just a single sentence, spoken by someone who had no idea the weight they were carrying. It was at that moment that everything fell apart and was rebuilt at the same time. Because finding out that necklace belonged to my husband's lover, it was like someone had placed a mirror right in front of my memory. I watched it all over again. The delays, the excuses, the averted eyes. I relived it all without having to move. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happened after this revelation was what really changed everything. Comment there. That makes sense to me. And it was there, in that room lit only by the dim light of dusk, that I found myself face to face with something I'd tried to avoid facing for so many years. The past wasn't over. It was just sleeping. And when it awakens, it comes with everything. With the smells, the sounds, the words we've tried to forget. The necklace now hanging around my granddaughter's neck wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was the end of an old thread, a barely untied knot that still needed to be faced. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most. Sometimes, sharing a memory or a moment of pain helps more than we can imagine. And it's in the comments that these stories are found, where a single word from you can comfort another person who's also been hurt by a truth poorly told. When you comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel, you help this message reach more hearts who need to hear they're not alone. because your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of content that comes from the soul, from skin marked by time and choices. And you know, I still have a lot to share about what happened after the truth came out, because that's where true transformation begins. She'd always been a sensitive girl, the kind who sees a gift not just with her eyes, but with her heart. When she opened the box and saw the necklace, her eyes shone in a way that shattered me inside. "Grandma, it's like your soul is inside," she said, running her slender fingers along the chain as if touching something sacred. And I believed it too, because that necklace, for me, had become a kind of talisman. It was something that had survived time, silence, and pain, and now took on new meaning hanging around my granddaughter's neck as if it were a piece of me moving forward with her. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The past seemed distant, almost erased. I only saw her joy, spinning with the necklace as if dancing with my story in her chest. There was something magical there, a kind of silent healing, as if that gesture put things back in place. But life has its backstories. And sometimes, the truth hides precisely where we least look, in the seemingly harmless details. Because as she smiled, full of pride, I began to remember things that for years I'd tried to bury beneath other memories. Small flashes, a date, a signature, an old card hidden in the same drawer where that necklace once sat. It was as if my mind was saying, you know, you just don't want to look, and it's amazing how the body reacts before reason catches up. My stomach churned, my heart skipped a beat, and even with that beautiful moment before me, something inside whispered, there's something there that needs to be faced. We think we've left certain stories behind, but when we least expect it, they return, dressed as gifts. What seemed like a symbol of eternal love was perhaps the echo of an ancient lie, but at that moment, I said nothing. I just watched. Memory is treacherous but also liberating. And as the days passed, the necklace became a reminder, not only of who I was, but of what I hid from myself to keep living. And seeing that intimate object with another person, even someone I loved dearly, touched every layer of my soul. It made me revisit the woman who endured in silence, who swallowed unanswered questions, who accepted half-truths just to keep from falling apart. And it reminded me of the pain I felt when I discovered, years ago, the origin of that gift. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it wasn't just about a necklace, it was about the silent transformation of a woman who had to relearn how to trust, to understand that not all love is pure, and that not every memory deserves to be preserved with care. Sometimes the greatest proof of love we can offer is to rewrite what seemed immutable, so that future generations will carry the truth, not the rubble of what was once a lie. Comment below. I'm on this journey too, if this story touched you in any way. That jewel appeared on a strange day, unlike any other. I still remember the way he walked through the door, with a small package in his hands and a smile that didn't match the moment we were living in. We were going through a difficult time, strapped for cash, arguing more than talking, and sleeping almost like two strangers under the same roof. And yet, there he was, handing me a delicate white gold necklace with a dark stone in the center. Beautiful, expensive, unexpected. When I opened it, I was speechless. It didn't match our reality. I'd just gotten a haircut at home because I couldn't afford the salon, and he, who was always complaining about the grocery bill, gave me a piece of jewelry that looked like it came from a boutique. My first thought was, where did that come from? But before the question could even leave my mouth, he hugged me and told me I deserved something beautiful, that I was dull, sad, and that it was just to remind me of who I was. I wanted to believe, because we want to believe, especially when our hearts are already weary of war and we just want a moment of peace. But deep inside, I felt it. I felt like someone who touches a cold glass and realizes there's something hidden on the other side. There was a silence in that jewel, a weight hidden behind the shine. But I kept quiet. I swallowed. I accepted the gift like someone accepting an apology that was never said. And I used it, as if it erased all the questions I didn't have the courage to ask. Over time, that necklace became a symbol of something I pretended to understand. It was incredibly beautiful, yes, but sometimes beauty can be deceiving. It distracts, masks, and hypnotizes, and I let myself get carried away. But every now and then, that nagging feeling would return. Where had he bought it? How did he pay? Why didn't he ever say anything about it afterward? It was as if that gift had been planted there, like a seed of distraction, to keep me from some truth. And for years, it worked. The curious thing is that even though I was suspicious, I held that necklace with a strange affection. Not exactly for it, but for everything I had to swallow while wearing it. It was as if it carried not just a memory, but an emotional struggle, a backstage of my story that I pretended not to see. And when I decided to give it to my granddaughter, I thought I was wiping its memory, transforming pain into affection, rewriting its meaning. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it's easy to talk about jewelry, but it's really hard to face the feelings that come with it. The necklace was just a mirror, the reflection of a marriage full of gray areas, silent decisions, and hidden truths. And when we start connecting the dots, we realize that almost nothing in life happens by chance. That jewel didn't fall from the sky. It came from somewhere, from some parallel story that I, unknowingly, was a supporting character in. And sometimes, it takes courage to go back in time and review the details. Not to blame yourself, but to free yourself from your previous naivete. Today, I understand that every gift can carry a hidden purpose, that sometimes what seems like an act of love can be just a way to cover up a bad choice. And understanding this didn't make me bitter. It made me attentive, aware of what's valuable and what's important, what shines and what hides. Write down, "This makes sense to me," if at some point in your life you also felt that a gift had more than it seemed. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we look back with a more mature heart, we realize the signs were always there, small, almost invisible, but present. He'd start arriving late, at first once in a while. Then it became routine. And me? I told myself it was just work, that he was tired, that he wanted the best for us. Funny how we become experts at justifying what hurts when we love someone, isn't it? But I could see. The gaze that once sought me out when I entered the room now fled mine. The touches became rare, hurried, as if affection had become an obligation. The conversations? They were monosyllables. He no longer asked how I was, and when I did say something, it felt like my voice echoed in the void. And yet, I chose not to see. Because truly seeing hurts, because facing what's right in front of us requires a courage that, sometimes, we don't yet have. One day, he forgot his cell phone on the couch. It was the old model, the kind that didn't even have a password. I stared at it like someone staring at a closed door that's suddenly ajar. All I had to do was reach out. All I had to do was touch. But I didn't touch it. Not because I trusted him, but because I was terrified of what I might find. I preferred to protect the story I'd made up in my head rather than risk destroying it with the truth. It's hard to say this now, after everything, but it's necessary, because so many women live in this fog, thinking that ignoring instinct will keep love alive. But what we ignore doesn't disappear, it grows, and the silences we accept accumulate, occupying the spaces where complicity once lived. That's what happened to me. A silent distance began to grow between us. I slept next to him, but I felt as if I'd been alone for years. I remember one night in particular. He arrived smelling of sweet perfume, which was never mine. I asked with a crooked smile, "Did you stop by a store?" And he replied, "It must be the atmosphere." The atmosphere. To this day, that answer echoes within me. It was as if he knew I knew, and I knew he knew I wasn't going to do anything. And indeed, I didn't. I just went to my room, lay down, and let the pillow absorb what my throat couldn't release. These moments, however small they may seem, are invisible milestones in the journey of a woman moving away from herself. With each excuse I accepted, a little piece of me was left behind. With each lie I pretended not to notice, my voice grew fainter. Until at some point I almost stopped recognizing myself. The hidden truth was no longer just his. It was mine too, for complicit in that silent theater. And it's not that I didn't love. I did. But over time, I realized that loving someone can't mean abandoning yourself. This was one of the greatest mindset shifts I've ever experienced. Understanding that true love isn't sustained by denial, but by honesty. And that when we give up the truth to maintain peace, that peace becomes a weight, a burden, a muffled scream that follows us in silence. Write down, "I'm on this journey too." If in any way you've ever felt this kind of silence within a relationship, Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because the truth sometimes has a curious way of reaching us when we least expect it, as if it were just waiting for the right moment to knock on the door, even if that moment takes decades. My hair was already gray, my heart was calmer, and I thought some memories had been buried deep inside, until it appeared. It was a random afternoon, one of those where time seems to move slowly, you know? I was sitting on the porch sipping my tea when I heard the gate. At first, I didn't recognize her because age changes the face, but it doesn't erase the look. And when she introduced herself, my heart sank. The name, the tone of her voice, it was her. A woman I'd only known through subtext, through whispers, through the absences my husband left me as a legacy whenever he disappeared for hours without explanation. She came with an envelope in her hands. She said she needed to talk, that this was something she'd been carrying for years, and that she didn't want to carry it with her for the rest of her life. I didn't know whether to close the door or shut it out, but something made me listen. Maybe time really does have this power to mold us to listen even to what would once have made us explode. She sat down, looked into my eyes with a firmness that wasn't arrogance, but weight. The weight of guilt, the weight of history. It started slowly. He said he never wanted to ruin my family, that it wasn't meant to be this way, that it all started as a distraction, an escape, that he said I no longer listened to him, that I was cold, that the marriage was just a facade. These phrases, repeated by so many mouths in so many contexts, sound like cliches, but when they come loaded with hidden truth, with behind-the-scenes details you've never accessed, they become daggers, and each word was a thin but deep cut. In the middle of the conversation, she pulled an old photo from the envelope. It was him, young, smiling beside her, and around her neck, the necklace, the same necklace my granddaughter wore today. That necklace I thought had been chosen with care, with affection, with some romantic symbolism. No, that necklace had a story I never knew. It was given to her years before it reached my hands. It reappeared in my life like a recycled lie, like an object stolen from a parallel story I'd never been told. I remember the feeling I had in that moment. It wasn't anger. It was astonishment. It was as if time had turned back just to show me that everything I chose to ignore had, in fact, happened. That the silences had names, that the delays had faces, that the perfume on the jacket had an owner. And she was there, sitting in front of me, her eyes brimming with tears, apologizing for something that had already broken my soul without even knowing it. She said she never saw him again after he decided to return to his family, that she didn't know he'd kept that necklace, that she thought he'd gotten rid of it, like so many men do when they want to erase their experiences. But no, he kept it, and he gave that same necklace to me years later as a gift of love, a gift laden with the past, with unresolved decisions, with truths that had lain hidden for too long. And me? I held that envelope, looked at her, and for the first time, I felt sorry. Not for myself, for her, because time takes its toll, and it did. She lived with that memory clutching her chest for years. I, with the silence. Each of us paying for a part of the same story, just on different sides of the truth. When she left, I went to my granddaughter's room. She wasn't home, but the necklace was on her dresser. I touched that jewel as if I were touching a secret, and for the first time, I felt the urge to tell her everything, to get rid of that lump in my throat, to write, to turn the pain into words. It was then that I understood that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way to appear. And when it comes, it doesn't ask permission. It just walks in. Comment here. The truth always comes out. If you have ever lived or witnessed a story that seemed buried, but one day came to light. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there are pains that don't scream, but weigh heavily. And when the truth falls upon us with this kind of silent force, what shatters isn't just memory, it's identity. I stood there, staring at the necklace on my granddaughter's vanity like someone staring at a ghost. Not a ghost from the past, the kind that time resolves with dust and longing. It was a new ghost, one that had been silent for decades, but that suddenly had a face, a name, and even a scent. It took me days to tell her. I didn't know how to explain that that piece of jewelry, a symbol of affection, held a story no one should inherit. Because it wasn't just a pretty piece, it was what it represented, what I myself had allowed it to represent. without knowing it. And when I finally spoke, I didn't have the courage to dramatize. I just told the truth, that that necklace had been worn by a woman who, for years, shared her life with the man I called husband, that she, that woman, had had a piece of him, a piece I didn't even know existed, and that he, for some reason only he would know, chose to hide that fragment of a lie inside a gift and give it to me, as if it were love. My granddaughter was silent. She touched the necklace, not with anger, but with a sweet sadness, the kind that makes us grow up suddenly. And I realized then that pain can indeed span generations, but so can conscience. She didn't cry. She just said, "Grandma, this is heavy, but thank you for telling me." And I, who had been carrying that newly discovered secret like lead in my chest, felt a part of me embraced, not vindicated, but understood. It's strange to think that a piece of gold can hold so much. It's not the material, nor the shine. It's what was experienced with it, what was said and omitted around it. And when we talk about betrayal, many people imagine the act itself, the hidden night, the stolen kiss. But what hurts most is what happens afterward. It's what the person does with it. It's what they choose to hide, transform, reuse, because he didn't need to tell me with words. He left the trail there, hanging from a zipper. And for years I wore it without knowing that I carried a constant reminder of the lie. Do you know what hurt me the most? It was remembering the times people would compliment the necklace. What a beautiful piece, so sophisticated. And I would smile, thinking it was an heirloom of love, a symbol of conquest. I never imagined that, behind that elegance, there was a dark history, that each compliment was, unintentionally, applause for a mistake that was never confessed. This kind of revelation shakes everything up. It affects trust, memory, the way you reconstruct your own past. Because when a hidden truth comes to light, it doesn't just change the present, it rewrites old pages too. I started to look at certain memories with new eyes, dinners that seemed distracted, trips canceled at the last minute, his way of avoiding questions. Everything made more sense, albeit a bittersweet one. And yet, I didn't feel hate. I felt shame, not for myself, but for having spent so long trusting a narrative that wasn't mine. It's as if, suddenly, life told me, you weren't stupid, you were loving, and you were deceived. And understanding this was liberating, because blame sometimes slips into the wrong hands. We blame ourselves for not seeing, for not knowing, for not realizing. But the truth is, those who deceive are the ones who bear the real weight. And you know, telling my granddaughter about this was a turning point, because she learned from me, not from the mistake itself, but from how I handled it. She saw that we can transform pain into wisdom, that even an old betrayal can become a valuable conversation, that it's not about exposing, about destroying memories, but about giving them clear meaning, without illusions. I think that's why, even with a heavy heart, I chose to tell this story here, because perhaps you, listening, have a piece like this in your life, an object, a memory, a gesture that now carries a different meaning, and that's okay. Life is full of these twists and turns that force us to rethink our trajectory. What matters is what we do after the truth comes. Comment below. I'm seeing everything with different eyes. If this excerpt stirred up any memories of yours or made you reflect on something you still hold without knowing its true weight. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because it was at this point that doubt began to consume me. Should I speak or remain silent? Should I tell the truth or preserve the image of a man who, despite everything, was part of my life for decades, and most painfully, part of her story too? It was as if my mind was waging a war between what I owed as a woman, to my own conscience, to the truth, and what I owed as a grandmother. Because it wasn't just about a betrayal hidden in a necklace, it was about stirring up a memory that for my granddaughter was still sacred. And the question that gnawed at me was, do I have the right to touch on this? Is it worth reopening a wound she didn't even know existed? I remember looking at a photo of him, smiling with her in his arms as a baby, and feeling a tightness in my chest. That was real too. The affection, the care, the stories he told her. None of it was fake. And therein lies the complexity of human relationships. Someone can deeply wrong one person and still be loving to another. They can have failed me and still leave a sweet memory for their granddaughter. This confused my sense of justice. I spent nights thinking about it, Silence sometimes felt safer, but it wasn't light. It was dense, full of unspoken thoughts. And the more I tried to convince myself it was better to leave everything alone, the more I felt the anguish grow. Because what tightened my chest wasn't the fact itself. It was the weight of carrying alone a piece of history that was also hers. I wondered, what if one day she found out from someone else, or in some other way? What if that woman showed up again? What if she herself started putting the pieces together? What kind of impact would that have, coming from someone who had no love to ease the pain? And that's when I understood. Maybe silence isn't protection, but abandonment. Maybe true love is precisely the kind that chooses to tell, even when trembling inside. But it wasn't simple, because along with the pain came mourning. Not mourning for his death, he had been gone for years, but mourning for an idealized image. And truth has this power. It doesn't kill memories, but transforms. It removes the polish. It reveals the backstage. And those who grew up believing in a beautiful portrait can suffer from the depths that time has hidden. Still, I understood that silence doesn't preserve the truth. It only postpones the confrontation. And I had already learned from life that what we postpone too long turns into bitterness. That necklace became a symbol of this, a burden disguised as a gift, a constant reminder that, even in the most intimate relationships, there are difficult decisions we must make alone. So, I decided to tell, but not as an accusation, not with anger. I chose to tell as someone sharing a piece of their own journey, like someone opening an old drawer and saying, "This hurt me, but it also taught me," and that changed everything, because my granddaughter, upon hearing it, didn't look at me with disappointment. She looked at me with respect, and she said something I'll never forget. "Thank you for trusting me with this truth, because now it's mine too." It's hard to explain the relief this brought, not because she forgave or ignored it, but because she understood. And perhaps that's the greatest gift we can give to those we love, trusting that they are strong enough to deal with reality, that they deserve to know, so they can build their own truths based on what is, not what has been edited. And look, it's not that I wanted to tarnish anyone's memory, but I needed to honor my own. I needed to clear the fog that covered this piece of history and allow her to see everything, the good and the bad, with maturity. Our relationship grew even stronger after that, because she began to see me whole, not just as the sweet grandmother, but as the woman I was, with my pain, choices, losses, and courage. Comment below. Truth is also love. If you've ever experienced a similar dilemma, or understand this feeling of having to balance silence and revelation in the name of caring. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what I felt couldn't fit into a sentence, nor a tear. It was a silence that spread through the cracks of my day, a silence no one heard, but that followed me like a shadow inside my house. And that's when I realized it wasn't just a necklace, it was the mark of everything I'd silently swallowed. Everything I'd left unsaid so as not to tarnish the image they'd built of us. Do you know what it's like when pain has no stage? It becomes a detail. It becomes a distracted look, a dry response, an absence disguised as fatigue. And that's how, without realizing it, I slowly faded away, maintaining the role of the strong woman, the understanding wife, the loving grandmother. But deep inside, a part of me was screaming for truth. And it wasn't a cry of rage, no. It was more a plea for recognition, as if I was saying to myself, "You matter, you have the right to hurt too." Because the world usually applauds women who endure, but it almost never extends a hand to those who break down. And for a long time, I thought that was what love was, enduring. But there comes a time when the body begins to speak what the mouth didn't dare. Forgetfulness sets in, backaches, strange dreams set in. It's as if the soul is saying, "Hey, look at me." And it was in this process that I began to understand that the betrayal didn't end with his act with the other woman. It continued inside me, every time I said everything was fine, when it wasn't. One day, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself, not because of my age, but because my gaze had faded. I smiled for the photo, but my eyes were far away, distant. That's when I started writing, revisiting memories, rereading old letters. And little by little, I recovered pieces of myself that had been buried under years of silence, because pain, when ignored, doesn't go away. It changes form. Sometimes it turns into coldness. Sometimes it turns into distrust. Other times, it becomes a strange force that prevents you from loving wholeheartedly. And I didn't want that for myself or for my granddaughter. I didn't want her to grow up thinking that true love is the kind we endure, even when it hurts. I wanted to show that there's courage in facing what hurt us, that there's beauty in rebuilding. Even if others say too much time has passed, because time alone heals nothing. What heals is confrontation. It's the choice to return to that wound, not to bleed again, but to cleanse, to close with awareness, not denial. That's when I understood the difference between forgiving and forgetting. Forgetting seemed unfair to me, but forgiving was a decision I made for myself, to release the weight, to not let that betrayal define who I was. I wasn't the betrayed woman. I was, and am, a woman who lived, who loved, who made mistakes, who trusted, and who moved on. With scars, yes, but also with wisdom. Today, when I see that necklace around my granddaughter's neck, it no longer hurts as it once did, because she no longer carries his story. She carries my overcoming. She carries the symbol of truth told with love. And that, yes, is a legacy worth leaving. Comment below. This makes sense to me. If any part of this story touched you or reminded you of something you also kept inside. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because telling the truth wasn't an impulse, nor a need for revenge. It was, above all, a choice of freedom. And it took me years to understand this. The truth, when spoken at the right time and with a calm heart, doesn't destroy. It opens space. And I felt that even after everything, there was still something trapped inside me, a part of my story that needed to come out of the darkness. I spent many days sitting on the edge of my bed, pondering the right words. How could I tell something like that without hurting someone? How could I bring up such a tarnished memory without seeming like I wanted to erase all the good things we'd shared? Because there was love, yes. There were happy moments, laughter, travels, the building of a life, but there was also a wrong choice, a silence that lasted too long. And that necklace, that blessed necklace, was the last shadow that still haunted me. My granddaughter had come home from college to spend a few days with me. She walked into the kitchen, all smiles, with the necklace hanging around her neck, and said, "Everyone there thinks it's beautiful. It seems to carry a story." And in that moment, I knew it was time. Because if I let it go, it would become a story that wasn't mine, that wasn't true. And if there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that hidden truths become half-told lies. I asked her to sit down. My heart was pounding like I was 20 again. My hands were sweating, but my voice was steady. It wasn't a speech nor a dramatic confession. It was just a sincere conversation between two women from different generations. I told her about the day I received the necklace, about the doubt I'd always harbored, about the signs I'd ignored. And then, calmly, I spoke of the revelation, how I'd discovered, so many years later, that that gift wasn't just mine. It never had been. She listened to everything in silence. She looked at me with eyes full of tears, but not of judgment, of empathy, of someone who understood that pain is part of our development, but it doesn't have to be what defines us. She held my hand and said, "Grandma, this is your story, and now it's mine too. But what I carry around my neck isn't his betrayal. It's the courage you had to stop hiding it." There I understood the power of truth told with love, the strength of well-placed vulnerability. Because I didn't give the necklace back. I gave a piece of myself that had been denied for too long. And she received not only the jewel, but the truth that came with it. And that, yes, was liberating. It's not about exposing, hurting, or deconstructing memories. It's about understanding that maturity also resides in late revelations. That true love isn't about perfection, but about presence. And that sometimes the greatest legacy we can leave those who come after us is the permission not to repeat our silences. Because when a woman decides to tell her story, without shame about what she experienced, she not only heals herself, she heals generations. She breaks cycles. She teaches that loyalty isn't synonymous with silence, and that protecting someone's memory doesn't have to mean hiding what hurt. Today, my granddaughter still wears the necklace, but she wears it differently. She wears it with pride, knowing all it holds, because now it's not just a pretty piece, it's a symbol of overcoming, of truth, and of a bond between us that goes far beyond blood. It goes through the soul, through trust, through the choice to be women who don't keep quiet. Comment below, I'm on this journey too, if this story touched you in any way, or if you've ever felt the weight of carrying something that no one saw. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because what surprised me, after all, was her decision. The way that girl, who I saw born, grow, fall, and rise again, looked at me with firm, serene eyes and said, "I'll keep wearing this necklace, Grandma. But now it carries a different weight. It tells a different story." It was there that I understood, clearly, that truth doesn't destroy when given with love. It transforms, it rebuilds. And the reinterpretation of that necklace was perhaps one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed, because that jewel, which had once been a symbol of a lie, was now the portrait of a woman who chose not to remain silent, and of another woman who decided to honor that courage. She didn't want to hide the necklace. She wasn't ashamed of it, or of me, or of the story behind it. Quite the opposite. She said that every time someone asked where it came from, she would tell them, not about the betrayal, not about the lover, but about me, about the grandmother who didn't give up on life even when the ground disappeared, who knew how to wait for the time to tell the truth, who healed herself by telling the truth, and who, one day, chose to free the words stuck in her throat. This affected me deeply, because for years I thought carrying this secret was a way to protect others. Today I see that it was just another way to keep myself chained, and it was she, with the lightness of someone who still has her whole life ahead of her, who taught me that our pain, when crossed, can become a bridge. It can become a lesson. It can even become an inheritance. The necklace now has a new meaning. It's no longer stained by past infidelity. It shines differently. It carries scars, yes, but it also carries resolve, strength, and a truth that was difficult to tell. And that's the beauty of a journey well lived. It's not about erasing what hurt. It's about giving it new meaning. It's about rewriting without lying. It's about transforming the past into presence, and presence into power. I watched her leave the house with the necklace around her neck and her head held high, and I thought, she's not just wearing a piece of jewelry. She's carrying a story. And, even more, she's changing her path, because I broke a cycle. And she, by welcoming me, started another. That small object, once shrouded in silence and confusion, is now a symbol of something much greater than appearance. It is the mark of a woman who faced her own shadow so that another woman could live with more light. And if there's one thing I want to convey to anyone listening now, it's this. We can reframe whatever we want. Pain, shame, regret, mistakes, everything can be given a new name, a new space within us. When we decide to no longer run from our own story, that's when true transformation begins. Comment, this makes sense to me if you've ever needed to reframe something that seemed lost. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something life taught me, and it taught me in the hardest way possible. Pain doesn't need to be passed on like a gift wrapped in silence. Not every wound needs to become an inheritance, and for a long time, I believed the opposite. I believed that protecting meant hiding, that loving meant preventing certain truths from leaving the box where they were kept. But time has this subtle way of showing that hiding also weighs heavily, and that some boxes, no matter how locked, always find a crack. Today, I look at my family and see, we carry scars we don't even know where they came from. Sometimes, an insecurity that seems silly, a jealousy that arises out of nowhere, a fear of trust. And when you start to pull at that invisible thread that connects generations, you discover there are untold stories shaping behaviors, silences sewn into the hearts of the women in our lineage. And the cruelest thing, all of this repeats itself as if it were destiny, when in reality it's just an unbroken pattern. That's why I told her. Not for myself. I'd already cried all I could. But for her, for those who come after. Because if we don't tear these veils, they become walls. And if there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that the truth may hurt at first, but lies hurt every day. Deep down, I always knew that necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a memory in disguise, a symbol of everything I'd swallowed to maintain a semblance of peace. And it's curious how, even after so many years, our hearts recognize the burdens that haven't been healed. The touch of the chain around her neck tightened my insides. It wasn't about the object itself, it was about what it carried and what I refused to see. But when she chose to wear it consciously, lucidly, and empathetically, something changed in me too. Because she didn't keep the necklace out of attachment or ignorance. She kept it because she understood she no longer needed to fear its origins, that she could give that story a new ending. And when she hugged me and said, "Grandma, the lie stops here," I felt something inside me reorganize. This is the point I want to touch on now. We have the power to break the cycle, to look at what hurt us or hurt those who came before and say, "This will not continue through me." And that's not easy. It demands courage, maturity, awareness, but above all, love. Love for yourself, for the next generation, and even for those who made mistakes, because carrying hate also makes you sick. You don't have to inherit your mother's silences, nor repeat your father's wounds, nor pass on pain that wasn't your choice. There's immense power in those who decide to break the pattern, in those who choose healing even if their hand trembles, because that choice doesn't just change their own life, it changes everything around it. And when someone in the family decides to tell the truth, a new chapter begins, one where there's room for questions, for listening, for repair. I know not every story has a beautiful ending. Not every truth brings immediate relief. But sometimes, the simple act of naming what hurt is already a beginning. It's already healing. And when we allow ourselves this movement, even without knowing where it will lead, something inside us aligns. Our soul breathes more freely. Our conscience rests. So today, if you're holding on to a heavy memory, if you have an old secret tripping you up, know that you don't have to carry it alone. Or move on as if it were normal. There are new paths. There are lighter ways to live. And sometimes, all it takes is a genuine conversation to start that change. Comment, "I'm on this journey too," if you feel like the time has come to break some pattern within yourself. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this story resonated deeply. And that, for me, says a lot. Because this space isn't about perfection or tidy endings. It's about truth, about processes, about everything we carry, and little by little, learn to transform. So, if at any point in this video you felt like someone had shared something that lives inside you, leave a comment here with the phrase, "This message was for me." That way, I know I'm not alone in this conversation and that this sharing resonated with others too. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It helps this content reach those who also need to hear these kinds of true stories. And if you feel like continuing this journey with me, subscribe to the channel. There's much more life in store for the stories I'll tell. And look, there's a video right here that complements this topic. Click and continue with me there. The conversation isn't over yet.